Good morning, everyone. My name is Patty Hubbard, and I am the Outdoor Recreation Grant Planner at Missouri State Parks. And this is the 2025 Grant Application Workshop for Project Development and the LWCF Boundary Map for the Land and Water Conservation Fund application. Hopefully everyone was able to download the application and the open project selection process, which is the application directions. If not, you can download the forms from the LWCF website. We do recommend that you use Adobe for downloading and completing the application. During this presentation, I will be referring to pages of the open project selection process, or OPSP for short, especially Appendix B, which is the grant application guide. I will be giving you page numbers for if you had it printed out. Plus, I will be giving you the Adobe page numbers in case you're following along in it digitally. This presentation will be covering the following sections of the application only: project location and the LWCF boundary information, which is questions 12 through 28, project management and stewardship, question 29 through 34, and project planning, question 62 through 66. Make sure that you focus your questions on this section only. If you have questions about other sections within the application, you can either email me if we've already covered those in the sessions, or if it's about the environmental review, please attend my workshop this afternoon for that section. So let's talk about the application itself. This application looks similar to last year, but there are a couple major changes, and majority of the changes that occurred in this application are within the sections that we're going to be covering today. So please make sure that you're filling out the 2025 LWCF application. Make sure that you work on that environmental review section early, because some of those replies do take up to 30 days to get back from other federal agencies. A complete application package needs to be received or postmarked by November 15th, 2024. A complete application packet includes 2 hard copies of the application, both that have been signed, and all the supporting documentations. We do ask that you do not staple or bind the applications into a book, because once we receive them, we have to scan them in order for our internal board to score them. So we ask that you please just use paper clips, a rubber band, or a large binding clip. So before we dive into the application, we're going to discuss preparing the LWCF boundary map. This map will be useful when filling out the parts of the application that we will go through today. In your application guide on page 22 through 23, or Adobe page 45, 46, you will find the checklist that you see here on the slide. It is designed to help you make sure that your map includes the information we are looking for on the LWCF boundary map. Please be sure to include everything that you see on this checklist. Take the time to create a good quality map. This map is very important because it becomes part of the federal record that designates your product as a protected park, and it becomes protected for outdoor recreation use in perpetuity. I want to make sure that I make this very clear, because sometimes people think that we are just protecting what LWCF is providing grant funding for, and it is not. The boundary should include the entire park. So for example, if the grant purchases playground equipment within a 20-acre park, the entire 20-acre park is what is protected under the LWCF boundary map, and not just the boundary of the playground. Projects that are funded are required to record a declaration to public outdoor recreation to the deed or deeds associated with the property, including the LWCF boundary map. These maps should not be larger than 11 by 17, and a majority of our maps do come in just on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And this works really good if it's a city park or a county park. If it is a large acre park, then I do recommend using the 11 by 17 size. Maps should be drawn using satellite or area images such as GIS, Partial Viewer, Google Maps, or Google Earth. Even though our example that I'm going to show you here from the checklist is in black and white, we do ask that you make sure that your map is in color. So in addition to the checklist, the application guide indicates an example map. Each required element has been given a numeric label for your reference that illustrates what it was on the checklist. You don't have to include these numbers on your LWCF boundary map. They are here in this example just to help you identify which one of the checklist items it's showing. So you will need a title, and that title should say LWCF boundary map, and it should include the name of the park. If you have an old map, it might say section 6F boundary map. We have changed that in the last couple of years, and now you should just label it as the LWCF boundary map. You should have a north arrow, a signature line and date, and this should be signed by your authorized representative, who is also the one who is signing your application. Number 5 is the date that the map was prepared. So you'll have two different dates. You have the date that the map was prepared and then the date of when the person signed it. Number 6 asks you to delineate between the project boundary with feet, and then you would subtract off any square footage of anything that is not included within your boundary map, such as a community building or your school building. And that building should then be listed in question 33 of this application. I want you to pay close attention to number 9. It's very important that all utility corridors, easements are marked on the map, because if this project is recommended for funding in the future, when work has to be done within that utility corridor, you will have to let us know, because this involves some stewardship issues. So if the underground utilities are not marked on this map at the beginning, then there's a chance that when the utilities go to work in this area, it could trigger conversion for you. So please make sure that you are marking all utility easements within your map. Under the signature block, you will put the latitude and longitude of one of your park entrances. And we recommend that you use the main park entrance for your latitude and longitude mark. This latitude and longitude should be in decimals, degrees. Okay. And the total acreage is what will actually be encumbered. So if you have to take anything out because you have something in your park that's non-recreational, that acreage should be subtracted off, and this will be the total of what is being encumbered. Make sure that you follow the directions step by step to create your map, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Also, the map is another great thing to have us look at during your courtesy review, and we can help you make sure that you have everything on the map that needs to be there. So now I'm going to give you some examples of some LWCF boundary maps. This one was submitted by a public school district who was doing a track project. This map shows a legend on the side that explains the different boundaries located on the map. This was done to show that the surrounding properties are owned by different entities and should not be included in our LWCF boundary map. This type of map shows how school districts might need to show ownership of surrounding land if they butt up to a city or county park. Note that the school district is only encumbering the area of the track and not the entire school property. This map was drawn by using a snippet of land from Google Earth and saving it as a picture. Then I created a Word document, inserted the photo of the park, and then added the text around it. Then I converted it to a PDF and added the color lines, text boxes within the photo of the park. I will let you know, majority of my LWCF maps do not have to have the surrounding areas around them in drawn around like this. So usually you're just drawing the boundary of your park. This was a special instance where we have an LWCF protected park across the street, plus a city park, plus another park. And National Parks wanted us to make sure that it was very clear that the school did not own any of that property and that it didn't need to be included within our boundary. So this is a special instance, but this is very helpful to show what schools usually have to do. Here's another example. This is the city of Billings. If you'll notice that the boundary is the red dashed line, and there's a key at the bottom of the map for it. Item 4 and 7 represent the water tower and the cell tower that are located within the park. Since these types of facilities are not allowed in parks, we don't want to encumber the land that they sit on. Since this is on the edge of the park, it was easy to draw around them and not have them within the park. But if your water tower sits in the middle of the park, you should draw the area around it and then subtract that square footage off of your acreage. The city will have to do a survey at the end of the project to get the legal description of the park without those two areas in it in order to record it to the deed and do the declaration. The acreage of the park will not include the square footage of the water tower, cell tower. So this project did not encumber the totality of the park. So this information would get included on question 14 of the application. Here's another map. This map was prepared by a professional landscape surveyor for the Grant City Golf Course. One thing I will note is please make sure that you are using a separate color that is very bright and bold to identify the LWCF boundary map to make it easier to identify. As you can tell here, it is quite difficult to tell what is the boundary map versus what is not the boundary. National Parks does like you to use the nice bold colors. They also ask that you use a system of dashes and dots to show the boundary map as well. Our last map that we're showing here is one for a very large acreage park. This LWCF boundary map is for our Weston Bend State Park. It's hard to read, but the total acreage of this park is over 1,133 acres. Note that this park is made up of several parcels, and there are several facilities within the park that are non-outdoor recreation facilities that have to be excluded from the acreage. On the map, we showed that the total acreage of the park, then we showed the total acreage of non-outdoor recreation facilities, and then we get the total LWCF boundary that will be encumbered. You will also see that there are several easements, restrictions, and leases that are within the boundary of the park. Each is clearly labeled on the map, and then they are explained in detail on question 27 of the application. So now that we've seen these examples of some of our common LWCF boundary maps, we are going to move into the application. So the first section of the form, the application, questions 1 through 8, ask you to provide general information about the parties included in this application. The first two questions ask you to provide information about you as the organization. This should be filled out based on the entity that is applying for the funds. Remember to use a mailing address. That way we make sure we get all communications to you. Note that we are no longer accepting the DUNS number, and you will need to provide your 12-character alphanumeric ID from sam.gov. If you do not have a ID from sam.gov, you need to register now because this process can take up to about a month to get that back. Question 3 asks about the application preparer. This is the person who's preparing the application. It doesn't have to be someone from your organization. It can be, for example, your regional planning commission, or it can be someone that you've hired to write your application for you. This is the person that we will go to when we have questions about the application. They are also the person who will receive comments from the courtesy review. In question number 4 is the person who's going to manage the project if your project is recommended for funding. This is the person who will be responsible for doing all the expenditures and overseeing the project. They will also be the person who will be required to attend our mandatory application workshop. Question 5 through 8 asks that you put your representatives and your regional planning commission. These are people who will be notified when you do receive award. Question 9 through 11 asks you to provide information about your organization's background and prior performance with the Department of Natural Resources. This is the first section of the application that is scored, and it is worth a total of 10 points. Pursuant to CFR 200, we are required to conduct a risk assessment for all applicants to ensure that we are being good stewardships of taxpayer dollars and that we are awarding grants to entities that have the capacity to manage the project. The answers that you give in this section provide us some of the information about your organization. So if you are selected to go into grant round, into the second part of the grant round, you will actually be asked to provide additional information such as your most recent audit, your accounting policies, and your procurement policies. Make sure to answer this based upon the entity that is applying. So if it's the Park and Rec department that is applying, then the information should be for that department and not about the city as a whole. If the city is applying, then this should be all about what the city information. Question 11, we are asking you to provide past performance history of grants that you have received from DNR as a whole and not just our LWCF program. So if you've gotten a scrap tire and RTP grant in the past 10 years, you should put that information here. So the first section that we are going to be covering today is the project location and LWCF boundary information, which is questions 12 through 28. And it starts on page 26 or Adobe page 49 of the application guide. This section here is worth 10 points, which will be awarded based on how you provide the information that is requested. The purpose of this section is to ensure that the site is suitable for dedication as a park in perpetuity. Question 12 asks you to provide basic location information about the park. So we want the name of the park address, and the location. The latitude and longitude coordinates should be taken from that main park entrance and should match the coordinates that you put on that LWCF boundary map. And please make sure that you convert your latitude and longitude into decimal degrees. There is a link in the guide to help you do that conversion to decimal degrees. Question 13 asks you to provide the legal description of your LWCF boundary. You can usually find your legal description on the deeds or deeds to the property. For majority of our projects, you will be encumbering the entire park, whether it's an acre or 1,000 acres. The only time you will not encumber the entire property is if you are a public school district or you already have a community center, water tower, cell tower within the boundary of your park. If you think you can encumber an area that is less than the entire park, please contact me so that we can talk through this to make sure that the project can be, so that the entire area does not need to be encumbered. But most likely they're going to say that it probably all does need to be encumbered. Question 14 asks you to indicate if the LWCF boundary is the same as the boundary of the entire park or recreational area. If it is, mark yes and move to the next question. If not, explain why and ensure that this is shown on the boundary map. So for example, one reason your boundary may not match the park boundary if there is already a non-outdoor recreation related resource within your park, such as that community center, the cell tower, water tower, or maybe even a fire station sits within your park. And we're going to exclude those. And so you will just explain that very clearly here, what we are taking out and why we're not encumbering it, and then make sure that it is shown, it shows up on the boundary map. Question 15 asks if your park is already an LWCF protected park. The LWCF program has been in existence here in Missouri since 1965. So we have a large inventory of parks that are already protected under the federal law. We currently have about 1,200 protected parks in Missouri. If you do not know if your park is already protected, you can send an email to mspgrants@dnr.mo.gov, and we will be happy to check that out for you. Or you can check out the LWCF website, and on there we list all the protected parks by county. It was last updated with our 2020 projects. If you think you might have had a project within the last couple of years, hopefully you know that already and know that your park is protected. This question also is asking you to identify the acreage of the park. The park acreage that you entered here should match exactly what's on the LWCF boundary map. And I will tell you this, these last two boxes in this question 15 are missed a lot. Okay, so make sure that you're filling out one of these two boxes, not just saying yes or no, but fill out the acreage here. Okay, because when you leave stuff blank, it makes it look like you have skipped the question. Okay, and so then points can be deducted for skipping questions. So make sure you get that filled in and it should match what's on the map. Okay, question 16 asks if you will be creating a new park or recreation area where none previously existed. If your park will create a new park, please explain what the property is currently being used for and why it was chosen as a park. If this is an existing park, mark no and move to the next question. Question 17 asks if this is an existing LWCF site, and if the site name has changed since it received its last grant. If this is not currently an LWCF park, check NA and move to the next question. If this is a current LWCF park and the name has not changed since the previous grant, just mark no. If it has, mark yes, and then tell us why that name changed. So there are, especially if your park got grant funding in 1965 or the early 70s, sometimes throughout history, park names change. So we just need to show how that has changed throughout the history. Question 18 asks if your project is located in a floodplain. To determine if your project is located in a floodplain or a special flood hazard area, use the FEMA Flood Map Service Center, and there's a link in the application guide on page 26 or Adobe page 49, or I put the link right here on the slide. All projects must include a copy of the floodplain map in their supporting documents. If you determine your project is within a floodplain or a special flood hazard area, you must obtain a floodplain developmental permit from the local floodplain authority in your county. For a list of communities and counties participating in the NFIP, use the link in the application guide on 26 or Adobe page 49. For some instances, the community or county may require a no-rise certification before a permit is issued. In the space provided, indicate if your project is in a floodplain or special floodplain hazard area and submit a copy of the floodplain map for your project area. If a permit is required and is already obtained, state the name of the permit and attach a copy of the application. List the commitments required by the permit, or if the permit is not in hand yet, include a commitment to obtain the permit prior to construction and to follow the conditions of the permit. If your park property was purchased using FEMA flood buyout funds in the past, your total project must be approved by FEMA before you can apply for an LWCF grant. You should contact your local SEMA office with the scope of work for your project and get their approval. The approval letter from FEMA and SEMA must be included with the supporting documents. If flood insurance is required, please provide proof of that insurance if you already have it. If you have not obtained flood insurance yet, then make a commitment on here that you will get that by the end of the project. Here is what a FEMA floodplain map will look like. Directions on how to create this map can be found on page 26 or Adobe page 49 of the application guide. I will also be talking more about the floodplain map creation during the environmental review workshop. That is this afternoon at 2 p.m. Note, I have marked the area of effect for this project. Since this is a large park and I am only including the area where I will be affecting it with the construction area and staging area for my equipment is what I've included in this area, in that red area. If the park is small, you might be affecting the entire park, so you will just want to outline the entire park. If you are unsure what area you will be affecting, you should draw your area of effect to include the entire park. It is better to clear a larger area during your environmental review than a smaller area. Question 19 asks if your site is continuous with or connected to any federally owned recreational areas. If it is, please provide the name of the recreational area and the name of the managing land area. So an example of this is, are you connected to the Ozark National Scenic Riverway? Or maybe you are connected to the Mark Twain National Forest. So those are what we're looking for there. In question 20, is your site part of a larger land management area such as a greenway or a regional recreational area? If it is part of a larger land management area, explain its relationship to the area. For example, maybe they're owned by the same agency or they might be owned by different agency. Do they share a master plan? Do the same people manage the project or the property? If you answer yes to these questions, there's a chance that MPS may ask the project sponsor to encumber the entire recreational area instead of just what's within your park. Question 21 asks you to describe the existing conditions of the site, including the size of the project area. Provide a written description of the current site and describe any unsafe or hazardous conditions within the park. To help illustrate where the project will be located, include photos. For example, if your project is the replacement of existing playground in order to improve accessibility, you would describe what the site looks like now, the age and condition of the existing equipment, and include photographs of the existing equipment to show that it is aged and deteriorated and not accessible. You could show photos too of the playground surfacing that you plan to replace and photos showing the accessibility routes or maybe the lack thereof accessible routes from the parking lot. These photos can also be the same ones that you will submit to SHPO for their Section 106 review. Question 22 asks you to explain why this site is suitable for the type of outdoor recreation that you are proposing. For example, if it's already an active park and you are adding a new amenity that will enhance the park's use, you can simply say that. Or if this is already a protected park, then state that this is already a protected park and has been since 1989 or whenever. Question 23 asks if the site includes any elements that physically detract from the outdoor recreational experience or represent a potential public safety hazard. Please explain any concerns you have and whether the project will address these concerns. For example, does your project area have overhead utility lines? Will the utilities be buried as part of this project? A requirement of the LWCF grant program is that when electrical lines are touched within an LWCF protected park, if possible, the lines should be buried. This is an eligible expense of the grant and can be added to your scope of work and your budget. So if you're planning to do electrical, those electrical does need to be buried, and that cost can be incurred by the grant. Question 24 asks you to provide the name of the property owner as is stated on the deed. If there are multiple parcels associated with the property that is located within the LWCF area, please provide information for each parcel along with a copy of each deed. In order to apply for LWCF funding, the project sponsor must own the property or have at least a 25-year lease on the property from a federal agency. So it's very important to understand we need a copy of all the deeds. So if you have 12 parcels and each parcels have their own deed, I need one copy of all those deeds. If you have a lease, I will need to see a copy of the lease, and you will need to make sure that it has 25 years on it. And that will be 25 years from the time the project ends. So if you are in the process of negotiating, I would negotiate a longer than 25-year lease. That way, by the time the project ends, you still have 25 years on it. Question 25 asks you to explain what is and will be the applicant's type of ownership and control of the property. From the list provided, indicate if the project sponsor owns the property fee simple, less than fee simple, or if the property is being leased from another government agency. If the ownership is less than fee simple, explain what rights the applicant has and what agency holds the underlying fee simple ownership. If the property is being leased, does the lease include approval requirements related to the recording of the recreational deed restriction that will have to go on the property at the end? The landowner must be an eligible applicant, such as a government agency or school district, and the lease agreement must be at least 25 years from the end of the funding, end of the grant. You must also have an MOU with them that states that the landowner will record the declaration of deed restriction to the property at the end of it, and that they are willing to maintain the property in perpetuity for outdoor recreation lease if the lease expires. Question 26 asks you to list all present, existing, and reasonably anticipated liens or mortgages or both on the property, and the effect that the declaration of deed restriction to outdoor recreation use will be required. Identify outstanding mortgages, loans, amount that is still owed, and describe how these will affect the current project. Remember that this is a reimbursable grant, and the grant sponsor will need upfront cash for material supplies before receiving a reimbursement from the grant funds. So, do you have enough cash on hand to get the project started, or will you need to take out a loan to get this project started? If a loan will be required to complete this grant, please indicate how much you anticipate borrowing and what the duration of the terms will be. Question 27 asks if there are any right-of-ways, easements, or reversionary interests associated with the project. Because the property located within the LWCF boundary will be dedicated to public outdoor recreation use in perpetuity, it is important to identify any parties who have a superior interest in the property. Please list all right-of-ways, easements, and reversionary interests associated with the site. Make sure to clearly mark the easements on the LWCF boundary map. Copy of the easement should be included with the supporting documents. If you do not know if there are easements within the park, read through your deeds, and a title search will also give you this information. And one thing you want to do when you are drawing your boundary map is remember that there is right of way to the road that may be in what is your park. You do not want to encumber that right of way. So the boundary for your park may actually be within the boundary from what you think it is. So do not include right of way of the road within your LWCF boundary map, and make sure all utility corridors are clearly marked on the map along with all the easements. So like I said, the best way to find out if you have any of these easements is to do a title search. And that leads us into question 28. And because we asked you to identify how you determined, how you figured out that there were any right-of-ways easements on your property. So project sponsors are required to do one of the two things. They must either conduct a title search to identify these interests, which is our very preferred method because that is the best way to make sure that there aren't any easements on the property, or you have to go down to the recorder of deeds and do some research and do that. If you do the second one, you should submit all your research to us on how you figured this out. But I'm going to tell you the best way to make sure that you find every single one of these easements that's on your property, especially if you have multiple parcels and multiple deeds, is to do a title search. You are required to do a title search if you are acquiring land as part of your project. That is an absolute must. So please make sure that you do that. And unfortunately, the cost of that title search cannot be included with the grant. You do have to bore it solely. So that is also a reason why we say that you can do the recorder, but it is best to know where all those easements are. And if you are someone who maybe your courthouse burnt down and all the deeds were lost, especially if your park has been a park for a very long time, doing a title search is also the best way to make sure you understand the boundary of your park. The next series of questions 29 through 34, pertain to the property management and stewardship. And this section is also worth 10 points. We are now looking at page 28 and 29 of your guide, which is Adobe page 51 through 52. This section asks project sponsors to provide information of how the property will be managed in the long term, so in perpetuity. Remember that the park must be maintained in perpetuity. So question 29 asks who will manage and operate the site. So example, it could be the Missouriville Park and Recreation Department. Be specific about which department will that is within the city or county will be maintaining the park. Just don't write the city. Our scoring committee likes a little bit more detail. Question 30 asks if this property is a public school, a reservoir, or a state wildlife area. If the site is one of these above mentioned facilities, explain how the public will have access to the proposed recreational area. Explain any kind of restrictions to public outdoor recreation will occur. So for example, a school may only allow public access when school is not in session. You should then include the school a community agreement with the supporting documents. Be very specific on the times when the public will have access. It's important to show that this is really a benefit to the public and not just to the school. There's a template for this agreement on page 19 or Adobe page 42 of the application guide. Question 31 asks if there are any pre-existing or planned indoor facilities on the site that would not themselves be eligible for LWCF grant funding. This question is asking about buildings within the park. LW assistance will not be provided for support facilities or portions thereof that contribute mainly to public indoor recreational activities such as community center, meeting rooms, auditoriums, libraries, study areas, restaurants, lodges, motels, luxury cabins, furnishing, food preparation, equipment, kitchens, and equipment sale areas. Now, bathhouses, public restrooms, maintenance sheds are eligible for LWCF assistance since their basic function is to provide support for outdoor recreational facilities. So those don't have to be listed here. If one of these facilities already exists or is planned in the space below the question, please describe and explain how or if the structure supports public outdoor recreation. If it does not, explain what the facility is used for. If your master plan for the park includes an indoor facility, Explain when the facility is planned to be constructed and why this location was chosen for this indoor facility. So, and then you'll want to mark that area on the map that that's the future site of the community center or the fire station, so we can be not encumbered. Question 32 asks if there are any pre-existing or planned resource management practices occurring within the LWCF boundary, such as timber management or grazing. So maybe part of your park is used for grazing by a local farmer. You will want to make that clear. If there are, describe the nature of the practice, the anticipated duration, and how the practice supports outdoor recreation if it does. Question 33 asks if there are any pre-existing or planned uses of the site that are incompatible with LWCF requirements that should be excluded from the LWCF boundary. If there are, please describe the nature of use and ensure that it is clearly depicted on the proposed LWCF boundary map. Examples of this would include cell towers, water towers, or maybe a professional sports arena. Clarify whether the future intent is for the area to become subject to LWCF once that use is terminated, or if the intent is for the use to continue with the park in perpetuity. What this means is if the cell tower or water tower were removed from the park, would that land be used as parkland or would something else go in its place? If the cell tower, water tower are on the outside edge of the park, you should draw the LWCF around the tower and not include in the park, similar to what you saw for the city of Billings. Question 34 asks you to provide a detailed post-completion plan of how the project will be managed and maintained in perpetuity. Project sponsors should demonstrate significant funding and labor to maintain public access to the project in perpetuity. Additionally, sponsors should indicate their post-completion plan for ensuring user safety and project sustainability for the life of the project and describe how routine maintenance of the project will be accomplished after the project is completed. Include who will perform the maintenance and necessary repairs and how often maintenance inspections will occur. The scoring committee really likes to see that the project sponsors have put thought into how this park will be maintained in perpetuity or forever, and that you can give some plans for your details. So if this is currently a park, you might tell us what your current schedule is for maintaining the park. If it's a new park, tell us how it's going to match up with maybe your other maintenance schedules that you have for your other parks. The next series of questions, questions 62 through 66, pertain to project planning and ask the sponsor to demonstrate that the project is a well-planned and feasible project. We've jumped to page 32 or page 55 of that application guide. This section is worth another 10 points. So question 62 asks you to describe how this project aligns with the Missouri SCORP. The SCORP is the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. This is a 5-year planning document that identifies outdoor recreation issues of statewide significance and evaluates the supply of and demand for outdoor recreation resources and facilities in Missouri. The SCORP provides unified guidance to state and municipal agencies as they develop and expand outdoor recreational opportunities for their prospective citizens. Priority will be given to projects that provide opportunity for program and activities identified in the SCORP, such as opportunities for biking, camping, walking, running, jogging, gardening, dog walking, wildlife viewing, fishing, family gatherings, and youth-related activities. Project proposals should develop facilities listed as priorities in the SCORP will also be given more weight. The current SCORP is the 2018 through 2022 that you will use for this application. The state is currently working on updating the SCORP, but is not completed at this time. So the most current SCORP is the 18 through 2022 SCORP. When you are looking at the SCORP, if you go to page 73 of the SCORP, that is where the goals and objectives are. The scoring committee likes it when you write the number of the goal and the objective that you are meeting and then explain how you are fulfilling that goal. Don't just repeat what the goal is. Tell us how your project fulfills that goal. Okay. Um, I know I don't give you a lot of space for this one. So, pick between 3 and 5 of them. And just stick with that if your project will meet a lot of them. If not, the 2 that it meets works out really good. Question 63, ask if your project is identified in a local school, regional, county, and or park comprehensive plan, master plan, or special study. Project sponsors are strongly encouraged to develop project applications that meet high priority needs to the intended citizens. The project sponsor should indicate if the project is included in a regional or local plan, capital improvement plan, or other land use management plan. If yes, provide the name of the plan, the governing body that adopted or approved the plan, and when the plan was approved or adopted. A copy of just the relevant portion of the plan. Please do not send in the entire plan. Must be included with the application. If you do not have a master plan or special studies, just write, the city does not have a master plan developed at this time. Okay, don't just leave this blank. Blank spaces make it look like you have forgotten to answer the question. If you have a master plan and this project is not listed in the master plan, explain why you decided to do this project instead of one that was listed in your master plan. Part B of 63, ask project sponsors to explain how the project fits into other projects that are planned for the site in the next 3 years. This is where you talk about future phases of your projects. So if this is phase 1, explain what you are going to be doing in phase 2. If you are working on phase 2, then explain what your phase 3 is if there's another phase. 64 asks you to describe the process that led to the development of the proposal and how the public was involved. Project sponsors are strongly encouraged to involve the public when determining project need. Public involvement is the means of building support for the project as well as a method for identifying potential partners. Project sponsors should describe the public involvement that led to the selection of the project. This could be city council meetings or a public meeting, open houses, surveys. And surveys can include Survey Monkeys, can include something you put out on your Facebook page or your website. This project sponsor then should also summarize any feedback or comments that they receive from the public that show support or opposition to the project. If you are showing opposition, please show what you did to address their needs and so that maybe now that they support it. Please include a copy of all the public involvement with your application as supporting documents. Question 65 asks what design elements are included that contribute to preserving environmental resources as part of ensuring a quality outdoor recreational experience for future generation. This question is asking project sponsors to describe what steps they will take to avoid or minimize impacts to cultural, historical, archaeological resources, threatened and endangered species, wetlands or streams, water and air quality, floodplains, farmlands, etc. Other factors to consider include landscaping with native species, preventing the spread of noxious and invasive species, minimizing impacts from hazardous waste sites, and sensitivity to environmental justice issues. Project sponsors should also include any design features that will be incorporated that will increase sustainability of the project, such as features that involve erosion control or minimizing stormwater runoff, such as rain gardens, or design elements that are unique, such as recycled materials. Maybe you're developing with a smaller footprint, so you're using less concrete and asphalt. You could be incorporating energy efficiency, such as using timers or sensors on the lights. Maybe you're installing solar panels or you're using gray water by collecting the rainwater and using that. So a lot of things that you can put within this question. Question 66 asks how access requirements under the Americans with Disability Act and the Architectural Barrier Act are being addressed for this project. For projects using LWCF funding, your project is expected to meet ADA standards. Links to the standards are in your application guide on page 33 or Adobe page 56. I really encourage you to check out the U.S. Access Board website as well. They break up the ADA standards by different facilities, such as accessible routes, restrooms, drinking fountains, and parking spaces. Under the recreational facilities, you will find play areas, play surfacing, swimming pools, wading pools, fishing piers and platforms, and sports facilities, including baseball and court facilities. In this box, you should explain how you plan to meet these requirements. The MPS asks that we address both how the facility will meet ADA and ABA, but also that there will be an accessible route to each facility and accessible parking. Every element of the project must now have an accessible route to it from the parking lot. You can earn more points by demonstrating that you have gone above and beyond the minimum expectation. The standards listed on the U.S. Access Board website generally list the minimum expectation. But on the play surfaces, so the standard list on the U.S. board website generally lists the minimum requirements needed to meet ADA, but on like playground service, it also does a comparison of like the 4 different types of servicing that all meet ADA standards. For example, some communities install universal access playgrounds. If you are planning a universal playground, tell us why it is universal. What features did you add that made it universal? This is your opportunity to tell us what you are doing to make sure the broadest number of people can and are able to benefit from the project. Note, there is a difference between ADA accessible playground, inclusive playgrounds, and universal design playgrounds. Use the links within the guide to help you determine what type of playground your project will be creating. Now for the last pages of the application, we have the supporting document checklist. The supporting document checklist is provided on the application as an aid to help you and should be completed before you turn in your application packet. The supporting documents are required documentation to support your application and must be included with your application packet. For a detailed summary of each of these items, go to the OPSP Appendix B, the grant application guide on page 10 through 12, or Adobe page 33 through 35. And of course, when you are actually reading the OPSP, you'll notice that I've highlighted things in purple. This indicates that you need a supporting document. In order for your application to be considered complete, you will need to provide all the information listed on the checklist unless it says if applicable. Then you need to determine if this one applies to you. So the example is the school community agreement. Public schools are required to turn this in along with a list of the hours that the facility will be open to the public, but a city would not need to fill it out. The instruction also includes template language for a lot of this. So the Missouri State E-Verify is included on page 14 through 17 or Adobe page 37 through 40. You will need to print this out and fill it in and turn it back in. And this is the one document that can actually be handwritten is the Missouri E-Verify. Okay, so you can handwrite this and turn it in, but nothing else can be handwritten. There are also templates for the resolution, financial assurance letter, school community agreement, and the letters to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Army Corps of Engineer. Remember that incomplete and handwritten applications will not be scored. A complete application includes 2 hard copies of the application and the supporting documentation. The certification of responsible person is the signature section, a responsible official of the sponsoring agency. This is the person that has been named in the resolution. Must cite and date this section to complete the application. The application cannot be scored. Examples of responsible officers include mayors, city managers, administrators, park and rec department directors, chief financial officers. If you are a public school, it is required that the superintendent be the responsible official and that the resolution has been passed by the school board. The responsible official does not need to be the contact person for the application, but should have read the application and understand the requirements of administering the grant and that the park will be protected in perpetuity should you receive an award. The responsible officer cannot be an independent grant writer who is not affiliated with the agency. Unsigned and incomplete applications will not be eligible for scoring. Remember that the final applications must be received or postmarked by November 15, 2024. And here is all my contact information. If you're going to send in for a courtesy review, remember that those are due on October 23rd.